Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsp@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Time. I'm joined by Clay Hamlin, a partner here at the firm. Clay, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing just fine. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well. Cool. So, Clay, you have a lot of employees here and from a lot of different areas, a lot of different backgrounds. How do you manage the ones that are remote? Like, again, we're talking people from different time zones, you even have some people that are across seas.
Yep. So it's a good question, and there's a difference between managing and training. That's all. Training is a whole other conversation about training remote employees, which is, in my opinion, much harder than training someone who's sitting right next to you.
That's true. And actually, I want to add to that. The training is a big part of the employee, right? If they're not trained right, how are they going to be a good employee?
Absolutely. So once you get past the training hurdle, now you have the managing hurdle. And the managing hurdle is, in my opinion, breaks down into 5 different areas. One of those areas is setting clear measurables. So if and you'd think that really you need this for every employee, right? Mm-hmm. But with someone who's local, right, sitting in the same office with you or in the same shop, it's quite easy to just kind of see what they're doing.
Okay.
And often gets to that. So they have a question, they can just sort of drop in whenever you're around, or you walk in, you see what they're doing, and you ask them a question. When someone's remote, it's like someone just put a wall in between, and now you can't hear them, you can't see them. They're probably out taking a pet for a walk or something during the day. You probably don't even know this. Mm-hmm. And those sorts of things just happen. So because you don't know what they're doing all the time, like you sort of do when someone's in the office or someone's in your shop or someone's, you have to then rely on things that are more measurable. So like very clear, much clearer than you're maybe used to, of set of directions and set of expectations of the person than you would necessarily have to do with someone who's around you. And it's easier not to do this. It's surprisingly difficult to set very clear measurables that someone can say, okay, I know exactly what needs to be done. The downside to that is then that's what that person is going to do. And you might think, well, that's exactly what you want them to do. But I left out one word, and that is probably all or mostly all of what they're going to do. So if someone's local, right?
I see you.
So when someone's local, let's say you set exactly the same measurables and exactly the same expectations, but then something comes up and you just, hey, can you take care of this? Well, that's not part of their measurables or expectations. It could be outside of that. Mm-hmm. So, but if you're going to have someone who's remote, then you're not going to get some of those extra things. Mm-hmm. But if you don't even set clear expectations and clear goals, you're living in Dangerland, because now they can
do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want. They can have a second or even a third job. Mm-hmm. And your productivity and your profits are going to suffer significantly.
Yeah. Well, and it's not unheard of that some people have done this, having multiple jobs.
Oh, sure.
What I do want to say is there is that level of transparency you look for. And we've had this on previous discussions with you, creating transparency so everyone knows where everyone's kind of at. And this is taking away part of that blinder, right? You said, right, like, it's almost like they're not physically, you can't possibly see them. This transparency kind of brings it back a little bit.
Right. So it's sort of like, I've talked about before with people. When you're running your business, you want to have monthly financial statements, for example, so that you don't come to the end of the basketball game and then find out the score. Right? You have it, you know what it is as you're going along. It's the same way with an employee. You don't want to wait until a month or 2 months go by before you find out what they did. Mm-hmm. Right? There may be a wall between you, but at least there's a scoreboard over there on the wall that both of you can see. So there may be a wall between us, but hey, there's a scoreboard. So that is one of the things that you absolutely have to have. It brings me to another point, though. So if we have a wall here, use good collaboration tools. So maybe we can make that wall partly see-through, right?
Okay.
So, like, for example, you probably heard that when you send someone an email, you can get more, you can be like harsher or maybe nicer than you actually feel.
Okay.
Like your emotions don't necessarily correlate with what you're actually feeling.
It's a lot harder to give emotion to, the text.
Or it's just going to be different than how you're actually feeling. Mm-hmm. If you use good collaboration tools, and I'm specifically thinking about like a video call, as opposed to email, text, phone call, you can't see body language. Mm-hmm. And you want to see body language, which does bring up another minor point, but maybe not so minor. The person needs to have their screen on.
Okay.
You need to be able to see them. The person who's got the screen off all the time, there's an issue there, and you need to get that removed.
Well, especially when it's something when you want to talk to them and you want to have that kind of face-to-face communication. There's a lot of importance to that.
Sure.
So if you are if you're teaching someone or you're evaluating them, as a really good example, you want to be able to see them face to face, and they need to understand that you're being serious.
Yeah. Or you can read understanding on someone's face, mm-hmm. or lack of understanding, and so they might say, if you don't have video on, oh yeah, I got it, but their face is telling you something different.
Or you can also tell if they're not even really paying attention too.
Right.
They're often some other place, and this meeting isn't even relevant. Yep.
Yeah. So COVID hit, mm-hmm. and everybody went home. We followed the rules for, at least for a while. And we had just really started using video conferencing. And a lot of people had their cameras off. I was talking about it with my kids where I thought it just didn't feel all that good. And my kids laughed at me and they said, they're not paying any attention, right? They're probably in the kitchen making breakfast, but they just, they joined the meeting and then went and walked their dog or something. Mm-hmm. And I was like, gosh, I think they're probably, this is like what I was feeling, but they're like, oh, they're totally doing that. Make them turn their cameras on. And I've subsequently read all sorts of stuff that says the same, corroborates what they said early on in 2021, that this is what was actually happening. They have to ask them to turn the camera on. And they're right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, again, it's the difference between, sitting like we are face to face versus just, if I put a blinder right between, I could be making faces at you and you wouldn't even know.
Yep. The other thing is business owners and employees are in relationship. Mm-hmm. Very difficult to have a relationship with someone if you never actually see them. Having a relationship with someone by email is not, in my opinion, a really good relationship.
It's not the same.
And you read about this in tabloids and stuff of things going kind of sideways or backwards when someone tries to have a relationship with someone by text or email or something like that.
It's a very different kind of relationship when they turn on their camera, right?
Yes, and usually much better. Mm-hmm. That's when you get to know the person, and you see their emotions, and you can see that the emotion and the conversation are matching or not matching. So use good collaboration tools. Like I said, if you're going to go with a remote employee, video calling is super important, in my opinion.
I just want to make sure I want to add to this. Aside from that, are you also talking about other tools besides just like video calling? So, for example, Monday.com.
Yep.
We use that very frequently, and it's probably one of the most useful tools that I use in collaboration with anyone else at Kaizen, because it creates a vast amount of transparency between all the employees. They know when it's getting done, how things are getting done. I think it's a great tool, especially because not all of us are available at the same time.
Yes. So Monday is a great tool for like projects, workflows. We use something called Count, and we also use that with collaboration with clients. And it's the same process or the same thought in that you were using a collaboration tool that everyone can see. An email typically is just between two people or people who are copied on something. Internally in Count and Monday, anybody with access to it can see almost anything that's going on. Teams tends to be much more, Teams or Zoom tends to be much more one-to-one. And so that is the collaboration there is mostly visual, but workflow and process and those have their own tools, as you rightly pointed out, and also are extremely good.
Yep. Yeah. So what else is in there for measuring remote employees? I
wouldn't say this is really measuring per se, but so you have the tools. Do you use them regularly? So, like, for example, it's probably a very good idea if you have a remote employee to have regular check-ins, maybe regularly scheduled check-ins, and then some not so scheduled check-ins, just every once in a while, or actually somewhat regularly check in with someone without any sort of warning.
Okay.
And what you'll find there is your engaged employees pick up the call almost always.
Yep.
And those who aren't engaged, you have to chase them. They don't pick up you don't know why, right? Because they're remote.
There's a blinder.
There's a blinder, and they don't answer. And you get a call maybe a couple hours later, and you think, okay. And then if that's regularly, now you need to have a conversation with the person about what they're doing.
And the physical version of this, if someone was in the office, let's say, this would be your water cooler kind of talk. Hey, I'm going to go get a drink, and you just stop by their cubicle.
Yep, exactly. So when you have someone who's remote and you start to wonder, it's not necessarily a terrible idea to ask your IT person, how often are there long gaps regularly? So like maybe they're off 4 hours a day. They're not doing anything. Your tech person can tell you this. Yeah.
They can tell by the amount of interaction with the computer.
Yes. But there you're getting into sort of the I'm no longer trusting the person mode. And there can be that because when you're working with someone who's remote, you can't see them and you don't know what they're doing, and there's that blinder. So there's always a tinge of doubt. It's almost impossible to not have a tinge of doubt about what's going on. And that's why it's super important to have the measurables, because if they're constantly hitting the measurables, do I really care if they're out walking the dog?
You're right.
I don't actually. And that removes the doubt. So if they're not hitting the measurables, and then you call them and they're not answering, and then you start wondering, and there's that doubt, and then you go to like the IT person. So there's a number of things.
It's like a chain reaction.
Yeah, there's a number of things. I wouldn't start off with the calling the tech guy, hey, every day tell me what's going on here.
I mean, that's a huge waste of that person's resource time, right?
It is, yeah. But anybody with a number of remote employees will eventually get to that point where you begin to wonder about somebody.
Of course. And I'm really glad you brought up the points, because that kind of like chain reaction, because their measurables is what they're hired to do, right? Hey, yes. I have hired you to complete this task. And if you're doing that, then there's not too much of a problem.
Yeah. Then you look at, on the tasks, the business owner who says, all right, these are your goals. These are my expectations. You need to take a kind of hard look at that. And these, remember I said earlier, it's hard to do this because they have to be somewhat, or I would say mostly, outcome based. So for example, and measurable. So if I said, hey, Mark, I want you to be a friendly guy. I want you to respond to customers quickly. I want you to be available all the time. I want you to look great. Whatever this is, right?
Those don't sound very measurable. They don't have a quantity.
Exactly. But a lot of times what I find when I talk with business owners is their expectations of their people, their team, are not, there's way too much sort of fluffiness in there. And that fluffiness leads to ambiguity as to what that person is supposed to be doing. Or at least leads to, if someone ain't looking, so what?
Yep.
Because I don't have any tasks that are, or I have very few tasks that are measurable. So if I look at my list of tasks and 80% of it is fluffy stuff, what I call fluffy, then, I can do the 20% in maybe 2 or 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, what exactly am I doing here? So, and then, you may have you might say, well, that person has tasks, but they, it's like a year's worth of stuff. Well, there's another problem. The time horizon is so long that it no longer becomes really measurable in sort of a timely fashion. So that's another aspect. It's got to be time-based and in relatively small chunks.
Well, and we kind of brought it up before, like you don't want to get so far out, right? You kind of want to stay with them.
Yes.
Right? You want that check-in, and it also ties back into what you were saying, like, hey, being with them every week and checking in every so often.
Right. Yep. Accounting firms get very productive during tax season because it's almost daily. Like, you need to get this done today. This is the stuff that needs to be done today, and this for the week. And you really don't even want to look beyond that because the mountain's too big.
Yep.
Right.
You have to be focused on
But you need to be, and there's a lot on that plate during that day and that week. That's plenty enough to look at. And really, and this is much harder to manage this way because it's more time consuming to develop these metrics. But once you do and you get in the habit of it, it becomes easier. You need to do that with everyone all the time in order to be successful with remote employees.
All right. What else is on this list?
The last one I would say would be foster autonomy. And this is what I'd be talking about. Let's say, Mark, you came to me, let's say I'm your supervisor and you come to me and you ask me, hey, Clay, how do you do this particular tax thing? I don't know exactly how to do it. Okay. So if I just answer your question, what did you learn?
I learned that I can come to you for an answer.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Okay. So fostering autonomy is, I don't want to say pushing back on it because that sounds probably not as nice as it, but essentially what I would do is I would say, that's a great question, Mark. What do you think?
Oh, okay. That's an interesting way of putting it.
How would you approach this? Can you give me some options? In your GPT search, what did you find? So it's what it's doing. It's telling you, hey, Mark, you need to be autonomous. I don't mind being a sounding board, but I'm not going to do your job.
Well, I think part of it too is you're pushing them, right? It's really easy for me who doesn't know anything, right, about certain thing to just go to you and get an answer.
Yes.
But if you're putting in the effort and you're trying to get there and then you're stuck, that's a different scenario.
Yeah. So there, if the person sounds, and this is where video conferencing comes in really handy because the person looks very confused. That's where you have the resource question. Where do you think you'd look for this? Do you have any ideas on where you might find an answer to this? Have you looked in one of our procedure manuals? Have you put this into a Google or a GPT search? Have you looked at last year to see maybe how somebody did it last year? All of these are potential resources. And if the person has no idea where to look, it's better to advise them, well, here's maybe a place to think about to look, rather than to answer their question or lead them, but first give them maybe a little bit of, sandbox, direction on where to look. Because oftentimes that's actually their bigger question. But you can't spoon feed that either too much, because they need to learn how to fly on their own. And part of that is knowing where to look.
Well, and again, as a remote employee, you may not be available at those same times as other employees, right? So them being able to
Correct.
find those answers in the times that they are working.
Yes.
Right. So I noticed when I was here that we had some computer stuff that I needed to be hooked up to.
Yep.
And kind of one of the starkest differences that I noticed was, oh, here's how you do it. And they would send me a PDF. And I was like, perfect. Right? Like now I'm just able to do it myself.
Yep.
And if I have questions, the other person's still available because that person was remote.
Yep.
But all the resources I needed were there, and it's all simply played out or spelled out. So it worked out great. And it's amazing the amount of information or wealth of information you can have just stored in a library for your employees, and just say, oh, well, if you need to know how to do this, it's all right here in this resource, and you can just search it.
Right. And I mean, it's a whole other topic of conversation, but systemization is what you're sort of leading to, and we'll get to that in another topic.
Perfect. Is there anything else you want to cover with this one?
No, I think we're good.
Perfect. Thank you, Clay.
Thanks, Mark.
You've been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.